Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon what time zone you happen to be joining us from. Today is Friday, January the 29th. My name is Jamie Stark.
And I'm Sean Wilson, and we are here for our 9th session, actually.
No.
Yeah.
No. That's right, because we have our numbering wrong on our notes.
Oh, do we?
It says session 8.
No. The reason is it is our 9th because Convergence was its own offshoot.
That wasn't an official session. Oh, okay.
It wasn't an official session, but it was hosting us, right? So it was official, but it is our 9th session. This is our 8th actual scheduled broadcast, which means we've been doing this for 16 weeks.
We have been doing. Wow. Yeah. It's interesting how quickly every other Friday comes up, and Sean and I find ourselves going, okay, wait, what are we talking about? One of the things that we have done is we took an opportunity, synced with the whole team, Praveen and Albert and everybody else. Why am I not thinking of Paul's name? We synced with everybody. We actually have a whole list of topics that now we're kind of working against. Both topics that we know that we can kind of go and do directly, kind of straight away, and then topics that we know we need to wait for some investments that are kind of coming down the line. And then other some topics as well that are oriented around particular events. So we're talking about doing something at Enterprise Connect, for example.
Yep. And in addition to that, we also happen to throw in a couple of our favorites, right? Because things like what we're talking about today, which. What are we talking about?
We're talking about networking today.
Yeah, we're talking about networking, and there's nothing that is more nerdy than Jamie and Sean coming into a room and deciding to start talking about packets and filtering. And literally, we just had a whole conversation about like, hey, what are we using as for packet filtering and or for content filtering? And it was an interesting conversation because this is the conversations we have every day.
Yeah, no, when we initially started talking about, hey, can we should use Skype meeting broadcasts, we should go and talk to our community, this would be a really interesting thing for us to do. Literally the first topic that both Sean and I thought, well, this is a no-brainer, of course we have to do this, was networking. And we thought, well, this is a wealth of information. We'll be able to stretch the networking topic, and we'll have, the session after session after session. I think I was joking on Twitter. I said, this is session 1 of N, where N is a very large integer.
Right. And the basis behind this is that, we have had a networking guide that we have provided to customers for years.
Well, not for years. Like I actually remember when this thing was done. This is a substantial amount of work, and it has a substantial amount of weight too. Sean actually wants me to do the actual demo of this, and so. Okay, that one wasn't quite as dramatic as you thought. Luckily, this thing didn't fall over, so that's a good sign. No, so this was modeled after the Cisco SRND, right? So if you're familiar, in the Cisco world, they have the solution reference network designs for a lot of different products. Communications Manager goes into a ton of depth on not only kind of how to think about the planning and how to think about the deployment, but also operations and monitoring management. And that's actually what we've done here with the Link Server 2013 networking guide. Now we do need to update it for Skype for Business.
Yes.
Right. And so, that is a set of work that we need to get done, and that's still ongoing. But the fundamentals of the networking guide for Link Server 2013 are effectively the same for Skype for Business as well.
And really, one of the things we're going to talk about today is we're not going to go super nerdy and drop into specifically packets and bits, but one of the pieces we are going to talk about is we're going to talk a little bit about the OSI model today.
Yeah.
And how the different pieces really impact that, and really how to think about Skype for Business, even on-prem and in the cloud, and how you kind of have to take some of those considerations in, including your own premises for local connectivity too, right? So,
so the idea behind kind of starting off with the OSI model is that we're first working under a presumption that everybody that's listening to this, perhaps has a slightly different amount of familiarity when it comes to networking. Maybe you didn't have an opportunity to have a lot of formal training around networking, and that some of the topics around this, you've kind of picked up as time's gone on. That's been particular to whatever work you were up to or whatever work you were doing. And so having the kind of grounding in yeah, it's a theoretical model and yeah, it's not something that you'll directly, apply, but that theoretical model and the way of thinking through, where issues lie is tremendously helpful from a planning perspective. It's tremendously helpful in troubleshooting, especially.
It gives a common vernacular for everybody. My big word that I like to use.
Ooh, vernacular.
It gives everybody a common vernacular taxonomy when they're having conversations. And this, one of the things that we're going to do another session is the evolution of the IT Pro and what that looks like and how it's gone. And you'll always hear me talk about that. That's one of my kind of spaces that I have an affinity for, similar to you and the multiple phones on your desk. But the specifics are, you're now going, especially as this evolution is happening, you're really starting to engage with different levels within your organization. You're going to be dealing with the business, but at the same point, you're going to be dealing with networking. You're going to be dealing with identity and access management teams. You're going to be dealing with a whole variety of teams. And when it comes to the network, being able to have a common vernacular and at least a cursory understanding, then you can tend to have conversations with those teams, and it gives you a little credibility if that's not what your core is.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we jump into the kind of meat of our presentation here, a couple things to be aware of. We're also running a Bing Pulse, as you see on the side here, and Paul and Praveen are in the backstage, and they're helping to manage the Bing Pulse right now. So you're going to be seeing questions that get fired off in the Bing Pulse. We're really interested to hear what your thoughts are on some of these. They're questions about networking. They're questions about your environment. It's just a way for us to one, kind of understand, like, who are the folks that are listening to us live versus who are the folks that are listening to us when we're recorded and archived up on our YouTube channel. And then also, there is a new feature that is available in our early release of the Skype meeting broadcast that you may notice, and that's a Q&A manager. And so feel free to go and type in some questions in the Q&A manager. Paul and Praveen are in the back again, looking over that. And if there are interesting questions that come up and we've got the time and the space to address them, we're going to get them sent over to Sean's laptop, and then we can just kind of talk through them live. One question was already brought up on Yammer, and can you guess what the one question was on Yammer that they asked us to talk about? It has nothing to do with networking.
No, well, it does, because it does use the network.
Ah, okay, fair enough.
But it would be much more at the application level, I believe.
Yes.
And I'm gonna presume it's a fruit based.
It is a fruit based, a particular varietal of apple, as it were. So the question, of course, was, how's the Mac client? When's that going to hit preview? Mac client's going really well. Nothing to announce. That's good. The product continues on its path. We actually, I kind of hinted a little bit that we've got a series of topics that are going to be things that we can't talk about yet until some investments come to fruition. Clearly, there's going to be a Mac Volume 2 that's going to be coming. We're planning for that public preview to be hitting next quarter, and so that's really exciting. So that's
and where do they go to make sure that they are keeping completely apprised of all of our stuff that we are launching?
Well, clearly they go to SkypePreview.com.
Exactly. So SkypePreview.com, 2 different tiers. There is a public one that anybody can sign up for. There's another one where it's NDA only, Insiders Program. They're both awesome places to be. Skype Preview is where you want to, SkypePreview.com. I know that everybody wants us to continue to tell you everything's where it is, when it's on track, and when it's coming. And so we're going back. We're still on our same path and our same plan. The fact that we haven't changed the dates is actually a good thing. And so let's get going.
Let's go jump into some networking. All right, thanks everybody. So, when we think about the OSI layer, the OSI model has 7 different layers, and each layer kind of describes a set of connectivity or a set of functions that would be used to connect between 2 different computers or 2 different hosts or resources. And so at each layer is responsible for different types of requirements. The first layer, and kind of the easiest one to think about, is the physical layer. So the physical layer literally gets down to the voltage that's on the wire. So if I'm connecting, using copper Ethernet, then I'm literally applying a voltage to that wire in a particular way, so that when that signal goes through that copper wire and hits the other side and hits another terminal, then that other terminal is able to identify that voltage as either a 0 or a 1.
Yes.
Are there other examples of the physical layer, Sean?
Well, the one that comes to mind, because it's something that's near and dear to my heart. For those who don't know, I actually was in IT at Microsoft running Link for us prior to Skype for Business for about 3.5 years. And the modern world of wireless. So I'm gonna take a couple minutes and talk a little bit about wireless. And there's actually a couple things to wireless that I actually want to talk about. Mm-hmm. One is I'm going to talk about business. I'm going to talk about it in the corporate environment. I'm also going to simplify it so that for home users. And this is a very valuable thing. It's actually in the networking guide. I actually was one of the contributors with Jamie, specifically around some.
Look, Sean Wilson, that's right. Update contributors. There
you go. But one of the things, so most businesses, and actually there's a question in the pulse that Paul will fire off in a few minutes, but it's how often or how often is your environment updated for wireless? And even beyond that was your wireless environment designed for voice? And if we think about it, I'm actually going to take it as a parallel. Think of touch devices. Mm-hmm. When did Apple come out with the first iPad? Let's go Pad.
Well, I didn't realize there was going to be a quiz here. 2011?
Nah, it was closer to like 2010, 2009, Christmas of 2011, right? Was when the iPad won. So, but I don't know the exact date. We're talking no more than 6 years ago. Now look at the prevalence of it, right? So average networks within buildings, okay? People build and design. So real estate and facilities organizations within companies will plan a 7 to 10 year lifespan before they do any upgrades. And a lot of networking is not designed, specifically wireless networking, is not designed for voice. It's designed for data that was used as for people that were alternatively from plugging in. Think of us at Microsoft. It wasn't until we launched Windows 8, really, and we went to these new fancy touch devices that doesn't have an Ethernet port, where we even had to say, hey, by the way, you're not having to wire in, right, anymore. And so that's a major consideration. As you start to think about Skype for Business and voice, and we're gonna take this up a notch in a minute to talk a little bit about real-time media and how that works, right? Mm-hmm. But one of the pieces I wanted to talk about with that, though, is that as you're starting to think about Skype for Business, and you start to look at your infrastructure investments, ensuring that you understand what your design and feature. We actually built out a couple buildings here that went to that open floor plan concept.
Yep.
When we did that, though, we never changed our design. We kept it based on when everybody had offices. Mm-hmm. What happens is you go into an open space, and what happens when Sean and Jamie start talking? Everybody moves to conference rooms. And so they're running from one conference room to the next, and they're trying to have conversations in quiet. And the piece to that is that as you take a look at how you're changing and configuring, and now you've got Internet of Things and your BYOD, you've got much more devices that are hitting those networks. Ensure that you're looking at it. I know at Microsoft, we invested in a tool just as the Skype team called Ekahau to go and take a look at what the different hotspots were and where we were seeing stuff. So that's from the corporate perspective. One of the things that we did internally is we actually went and looked at a number of wireless routers. Mm-hmm. And we actually went and we had 10 on the list, and we whittled them down to 4. But a lot of there was a couple key pieces that we wanted to ensure that when we looked at those routers was that they did auto channel negotiation.
Sure.
Because channel overlap is one of the biggest things. And we also actually went and tested them like in apartment buildings to see how they would react with lots of signals. These are great things to consider and look at. But the number one thing that we were, from our guidance that was for people, was if you are going to connect over Wi-Fi, and you're going to do it in your home. Understand what else is connected to your network, right? And that really comes down to the load that's on the network. We'll talk about it. But one of the things that we did specifically was if somebody is able to be within 25 feet and not have walls in front of them, 5 gigahertz is great. And everybody talks about this 5G. Mm-hmm. There's a problem though. 5G, because it's a much tighter band, doesn't make it through walls and structures as well as 2.4.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's one of the things about RF. I mean, it's a very different mindset to think about. Yeah, you are operating in a shared medium with Ethernet, whether it's wired Ethernet or whether it's wireless. The idea is that the medium that I'm communicating my signals on, that physical layer, is shared across all my clients, right? So from Wi-Fi, that sharing isn't physical. It's not voltage on the wire, right? That sharing is time to transmit my radio, right? And that radio transmission, which Sean's referring to of 5 gigahertz versus 4 gigahertz, is the spectrum that's used. And so if you get into kind of RF theory, what you'll learn is that as you go up in your spectrum, as you go up in the rate at which you're transmitting, so from kilohertz to megahertz to gigahertz, your power that's needed to go the same distance increases, right? And so this is like a universal law of kind of energy. Like as energy moves away from its source, its power decreases by a square of the distance. So I might have gotten that wrong. But the idea sounded good. Yeah, no. But the idea is that when if I have two equivalent radios and one's 2.4 gigahertz and one's 5 gigahertz, and I step away 100 meters from those radios, that 5 gigahertz radio is going to come in as a lower power than the 2.4 gigahertz radio. If the amount of energy that's being sent to those stations is equivalent. And so that's where you find in buildings the 5 gigahertz radios, that 5 gigahertz spectrum doesn't go through those buildings as effectively because they don't propagate as far. And this is where you start to get into some of the like there's an art around Wi-Fi that I think isn't terribly appreciated, and that you really need to, especially if you have an opportunity to design a new building, you need to step back and you need to kind of think through at a fairly detailed level, because instead of just I'm gonna have wire and it's gonna be throughout my building and folks are gonna plug into that. First you got to think, what's my physical structure made of, right? So if you're looking to tear apart a warehouse and turn it into open space and have that be your facility, well, if that warehouse is built out with a bunch of metal rebar, effectively it's a Faraday cage. Like it's going to trap all the RF inside that, and you're going to have to think through that. Hospitals run into this a lot when they're deploying wireless solutions. They can't expect that there's going to be wireless available in the stairwells. They can't expect the wireless is going to be available when there's some walls, because the building was built 150 years ago. Like, it's built with steel. This stuff it's going to block a lot of that RF. Yeah. We actually had a case in one of our buildings where and this is one of those things that happens. The radio, the access point for Wi-Fi, the radio was installed between two giant metal conduits, right? Yeah. And so because it was just one of those things, like the HVAC guys came in and they put in their duct work, and then the next contractor comes in and goes, oh, well, that's where the radio goes, and they didn't realize, the radio can't be shielded behind metal. Like, that is not a good thing for RF.
Yeah. So let's kind of take it up a level.
All right.
Okay. So what are some of the other things that really impact Skype for Business, right? Like, we could totally nerd out, literally you and I, for 3 hours, but we figure people will want to get on with their day at some point. Right?
This will not be as long of an episode as our last episode.
I don't know, we're running the right amount of time for it.
No.
But we could definitely continue this as we.
So critical for Skype for Business is that media traffic needs to be prioritized. That is one of the kind of key precepts that we have for definitely for deploying in server, and as well now for deploying it online with ExpressRoute, is that Skype for Business. If you tear apart the things that Skype for Business does, there's a set of work that's signaling, and that is the client talking to the server or talking to the service, or talking to or talking to other elements within the network, and getting resources. And then there is that's effectively setting up sessions. Layer 5 of the OSI model is setting up those sessions using the session initiation protocol called SIP.
Yep.
And then there's all of the media traffic, and that media traffic generally flowing over UDP, and that has an opportunity to get interrupted. So why is it that UDP traffic has an opportunity to be interrupted?
So it's I'm going to give, this is the story that I actually learned, and I'm going to share the story when I did today. So you've got TCP and you've got UDP, and TCP is our typical traffic we're very much aware of, right? We go check a website, we send out for a request for it to give us information, and it brings it back to us. One of the reasons is because the way that the packets are built within TCP is that there is it sends, and it says like, hey, let's say 1, 2, 3. Let's think of it as breadcrumbs. And so it sends that packet off to the far side. The far side receives them. It receives a header that says, by the way, there's 3 packets and this is the order they're in. Well, if it doesn't get them in those, it does what's called a retransmit, and it sends back and says, hey, you forgot to send me all your goods. It's like sending, your wife or husband back to the store to go get the stuff they forgot, right? That was on the list. So then they go back and it sends the packet again. And so within that is a very resilient model that's built there.
So within the protocol is actually saying, okay, here's a packet, here's another one, here's another one, here's another one. Then the receiver is able to go, yep, okay, I've got, yep, okay, I've got, yep, okay, I've got, and oh wait, this one's out of order. This is the wrong one. So clearly one was dropped somewhere. So go and do that again. Now is that something that Skype does, or is that something that's handled by the networking stack, the underlying layers?
That is actually handled by the underlying network layers.
Cool. Okay.
And so that exists across every application and tool that hits the internet, or that's using TCP on the network.
Right. And so if we think about it, so I've got my physical connection. I'm trying to bring it back to the OSI thing we talked about. So I got my physical connection between the two of us. So that's a wire. And then on top of that, I'm going to communicate between us as hosts. So you've got an IP address. I've got an IP address. That's my layer 3. That's my identification of the host. And then on top of that, I'm setting up a connection using TCP to actually identify the service or the program that I want to go and use on that host. So whether that's a SIP registrar running on TCP 5060, a web server running on 80,
or 443 if it's secure.
Excellent. Right? Okay, there you go. Do you remember some others? SFTP for 25.
Yeah.
This could be a good concept.
This could be. I think this might be the next MVP bingo. Right? So let's talk a little bit about that UDP piece, because it's real-time media by default uses UDP. And the way that UDP, I like to describe this to people that don't know, UDP is like a fire hose. Okay, or even a hose, right? And so if you're going and you're trying to water your garden and you want to water all your flowers, it's going to get there. However, if you hit a tree or you hit a fence in between, that water is not going to get there. It's the same with your real-time media. So if I send 4 bits of information, and one of those gets blocked because of network congestion or anything else like latency or whatever, and it's just not going to get there.
Well, that sucks.
It does.
Well, then why? Then that's stupid. Why even have UDP? Like, come on. Like, let's have a protocol that's connection oriented. Let's do that all the time, and let's just use TCP for everything. Like, what's the problem?
It's much more efficient actually to use UDP, and you get actually a better experience in the long run with UDP, with the way that voice and video work. Because can you imagine that I try to have this conversation with you and the sentence says the cow jumped over the moon, except you get the cow jumped retransmit over the moon, right? So the way that UDP works, it would be much better to say the cow jumped the moon than it would be to like stop the conversation.
That's right. So the parts of the application that sit on top of the networking stack, they can actually have intelligence to be able to fill in on any of the missed packets. And then that way you're not having to have this giant buffer there to be able to, on either side that you would if you were using TCP and you needed to fill in all those gaps. And that buffer, obviously for real-time communications, if you have a giant buffer, now all of a sudden you're not real time anymore. Now all of a sudden you're having to you're having some kind of delay end to end, right?
Similar to this.
Yeah, right, exactly. Well,
but it's one
similar in experience,
yeah,
but for a different reason. Yeah, totally. So hold on. So one important thing that I wanna just make sure folks understand TCP versus UDP. So when we talk about TCP, we're talking about we actually have a connection established. Like there's a protocol and a handshake in a way that we're establishing a connection between end to end. And so we call TCP a connection oriented protocol, meaning I've actually said, hey, yeah, we're good. Okay, and now I've got this thing established. Whereas UDP we describe as connectionless, right?
I hope you're there to receive this.
Exactly. Which now gives me the opportunity to tell my joke.
Okay.
So why is it so hard to tell jokes about UDP? Because you never know if the audience is going to get it.
Exactly.
I love that one. I love that.
I like the TCP one. I have a TCP joke to tell you.
Okay, what's your TCP joke?
I have a TCP joke. Okay, so you just get two fingers at the top of the.
Every time I do a networking session, I end up using my UDP joke, and it kills. It kills. Perhaps it's the audience. So.
One thing I want to get to, because we can totally dive into the weeds on sessions and connectionless, and I really want to be mindful of people's time because we'll talk all day because this is what we love to do. But one of the things I want to make sure that we talk about. So the way that Skype for Business is set up, even in the way we've done it in the cloud, but even how people have deployed it on premises, is actually with the front end and the edge, and why that's really important, and not trying to utilize VPN as a way to get back for that real-time media.
Yep, absolutely.
And that actually also ties in, like we talk about VPN, also talks in to content filtering and deep packet inspections, some of those kind of things too as well, right?
Because so first, we're going to be able to scratch the surface of these topics.
And then you're going to have to tell us what you really want to hear more about.
Totally. So VPN. So this is actually a really great topic. So the first thing to establish is that everything that you do in Link and in Skype for Business by default is encrypted. By default is secured. Now, from kind of a legal perspective, you're never going to see us claim that anything is perfectly secure, because that's a fantasy of kind of quantum computing, right? Like nothing can be perfectly secure. So when we describe what we're doing from a media and signaling perspective, what we say is that we're encrypting end to end. And we provide that by default. It's actually ridiculously difficult to turn off all of the security protocols and measures that we put into Link Server and Skype for Business, because we just think that everybody should have that by default. And so that's where the PKI, the public key infrastructure, and the certificate infrastructure is needed to be able to operate with Link and Skype for Business. So we'll use your corporate AD certs, we'll use your private keys to be able to secure all of the communications end to end. And then if you crack open either the TCP signaling traffic that's actually encrypted with TLS, or you crack open the UDP media traffic, that the protocol that's used there is SRTP for secure real-time protocol. If you crack that open, you're just going to see noise. So you can't grab the packets, unscrew all the IP addressing information, and unscrew all the kind of UDP headers, have that data, and drop it into a sound program and say play this. Like it just sounds as noise.
Yeah,
right.
They won't ever hear it.
Yeah, exactly. Because what we're doing is by default, everything is encrypted for both signaling using TLS and media using SRTP. So then what's the issue with the VPN? Like,
so the concept
so
the whole way a VPN works is it basically creates an encryption tunnel around your traffic to get it into the network, right? And so you're now doubly encrypting. And part of that is that the way that the traffic works, it doesn't work well to be doubly encrypted because it doesn't deal with bandwidth constraints. It says, hey, by the way, my number one goal is to encrypt this and to ensure that it gets there, not necessarily that it gets there clean.
Yeah, absolutely. And so a lot of times what a VPN tunnel is going to establish is a TCP-based kind of virtual connection between your workstation and a VPN concentrator or some other piece of kind of head-end equipment that's inside of your organization. So when you establish this VPN tunnel, effectively it's doing two things. It's telling your networking stack on your workstation, hey, anything that needs to go into the business is going to go funneled through this this particular pipe, right? And then it goes and it funnels through this pipe. It uses TCP to encapsulate all that traffic, and then it dumps that traffic out onto your network behind your firewall. And then the idea is that you can only establish this VPN connection if you have a really high threshold of security, right? So you got some two-factor auth, or you've got some other password and PIN, or some other kind of process in order to set up that tunnel.
I'm being prompted by our curator on the other.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple. First, he said remind them to check out Bing Pulse, and his last question was how bad are our jokes? So I'm not sure if we should be doing that.
Wow.
But,
appreciate it, Paul.
Oh, we need a light wave.
Oh.
So one of the things that we have in this office is it has a time sensor for the lights, because it's power and they want it to be efficient, but it tends to go off. Okay, you can go back. There we are.
No, I literally tried to turn it on like 3 times. So now we know. So that happens 30 minutes in.
Yeah, exactly. That's our warning, right? Our warning moment.
That's our cue that we've got to start tracking towards our eventual conclusion. So moving on VPN. So I've got this. So clearly, having a VPN makes a lot of sense for a mobile first, cloud first workforce, where you want to be able to have folks have access to corporate information in a secure fashion on workstations and other PCs that your organization deems as meeting the right security measures. So all that makes sense. The downside then is that I'm taking all of in addition to my web traffic for my SharePoint, or my email traffic for Exchange, or my CRM traffic,
or any line of business
SAP or whatever, all that in addition to all of that traffic, which generally doesn't have a lot of requirements for real time nature. I'm taking all that, and I'm taking all my Skype for Business traffic, and I'm putting it down to a pipe that really couldn't care less about real time communications and media, right? And so the issue is now you get a fairly poor experience. So what are some things that the customers can do if they need to have a VPN operating and they want to do Skype for Business?
Yeah, so actually it's what we do here too, which is actually we actually split tunnel, right? So what we do is we say, hey, by the way, any of our applications that need to go to the internet, route to the internet, versus those that need to hit our internal FQDN and hit our internal network.
Yep.
Because what that does is that then means I'm only sending that key traffic over that one pipe through the VPN. And what that also does is then that Skype for Business traffic routes out and hits the edge, which is designed to handle the Skype for Business real-time media traffic and bring it securely into your network. Right?
Exactly. So the concept here is that you can trust the fact that we're doing all the right things by the security. You can look through our networking white paper. We've got some security presentations from previous conferences. You can look through some security documentation that's available out on TechNet, and you can kind of crack open and see how our edge process works. And our edge process does all the right things to ensure that, one, I get the right signaling connection in. It proxies those signaling connections. It doesn't It doesn't just kind of blindly let that stuff through.
Mhm.
It provides tokens. It's the MRAS service that provides tokens for being able to set up media sessions. And all that is all that security piece is wrapped together with a set of protocols for establishing connections through high NAT-based firewalls and these protocols are called ISTUN in turn. These are all things that we can talk about in future networking sessions.
Yeah. What I want to do is, because we obviously are running long on time, because we just love talking about this, is I thought we could also address some of the stats that we got out of the Bing
Yes,
Pulse.
that's great.
By the way, make sure that you're responding to the Bing Pulse. And actually it's interesting because we had a 52% people that have joined this before.
Oh, wow.
47% said no, which actually was really surprising for me. But the one that blew me away, is your wireless enterprise voice ready? Yes or no? 57% said yes.
Wow.
That's impressive.
That really is impressive. That is, when I have an opportunity to talk with customers at our EBC, our Executive Briefing Center, a lot of times these customers have some experience with Skype for Business. They got some experience with Link Server, and they maybe they've deployed for their workstations, they've deployed some phones, but they haven't quite deployed the mobile pieces. That's the first thing I always talk about is, boy, everything changes as soon as you're getting people with mobile devices that are running those clients, and they're expecting to have those clients operate in all the areas of the building. Yep. When folks show up, this may be a cultural thing, but here at Microsoft, folks show up to meetings and they all have laptops, they all have workstations, and a lot of times we'll, in addition to having a presentation up on a projector, we'll also have folks join a Skype for Business meeting, both from within the room and outside the room as well, to be able to, I'm getting old, my eyesight sucks, and so it's nice to have it's nice to have the presentation kind of there on my workstation locally, or an exec with a tablet having the presentation there so they can kind of key in on stats or whatever. But what that means is, in your conference room, you may have a dozen people all connecting to a meeting and all getting a video stream, yep. Right? And that all of a sudden takes the calculations for wireless just way out the window.
Well, the thing that really threw me for that one, which was very much Microsoft's answer, was we said only 57% are enterprise voice ready, right, for wireless?
Right.
What do you think the percentage of people that support Skype for Business on wireless is?
I think it's low. You think it's high, really?
87%.
Yeah, maybe there's some selection bias here. Like maybe our audience here, our folks are just right. You guys have already thought.
Well, they found this. 80% of the people found this session valuable. So obviously they like the nerd talk.
No, that's great. And I think boy, this brings up a really interesting topic, because the concept of supporting wireless, right? Like, not only do you need to have kind of the actual infrastructure in place, like, so upgrading your access points, you're deploying something modern like an Aruba Networks, deployment, now an HP company, and having the all those kind of pieces set up. It's not just that, then it's also kind of the human process as well, to ensure that the employees understand, how to take advantage of wireless, that all the workstations and all the BYOD devices are doing right by the network, that the help desk has the right processes set up, so folks understand, how to troubleshoot these things, like all that has to be in place, right?
Totally. And one of the things that we actually did it, and we'll wrap up here quickly in just a minute, maybe, is internally what we had is we found that it was about end user education. And what we ended up doing was we actually took what we called the good, better, best. And we actually developed it for some senior leadership, because what was happening is senior leaders were all traveling around the world. They're sitting in hotel lobbies. They're sitting at home on their deck to join these meetings, because, it's global hour. So it's the worldwide meeting, and it's happening here in Redmond, and, it's 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. So they're at home. And so we built this good, better, best scenario. And a lot of it is, helping your users understand what's the best way for them to get the best experience. And sometimes it is, hey, you know what? I don't have reliable wireless. I'm going to call in over a landline or my
Sure. And a lot of times too, it's getting users to think about not just that one piece, but the union of all of those pieces kind of end to end. I remember taking an audio recording class back in college, and this is one thing that always stuck with me is that my instructor would say, you got to think through signal flow. You got to think through the instrument plugged into the one piece of equipment, and then we're taking signal out of that and it's going into the mixer. Is it going through the right way into the mixer? Is it really hitting the recorder in the right way? To think through that signal flow. When it comes to media connections, it's my workstation. It may even actually starts at my headset, right? It's my headset. It's the thing that's capturing my audio. Then that's connected into my workstation. Then it's my media stack.
You mean having a USB hub with 13 devices plugged into it's not a good thing? I think we need to have a whole other conversation about best practices, right? But
speaking of which, that's actually something that the networking guide does a really good job with. So you may crack this open and you may think like this is going to be full of kind of ports and protocols and stuff, but there is actually a lot of time spent into troubleshooting specific device issues. There's a lot of time spent into troubleshooting that signal flow kind of question and providing some rubric to help folks kind of think through this end to end.
So with that, I would give you questions, but I don't have them because my computer died of battery.
Oh!
So that was the indicator that we talked about. We've basically gone through all of them. I've gotten actually there was one that was there, which was SDN, which we'll have a whole nother session on. It looks like it's split 50-50 almost between people considering it versus not considering it. Nobody's deployed. I think we should have it. Maybe we'll bring somebody in that knows more about SDN than I do to talk with you about.
We'll definitely do an SDN thing. I've actually had a couple presentations about SDN at Tech Ed. So you can check those out on Channel 9. Just do a search for Jamie and you'll see a bunch of stuff I've done in the past. We could definitely do a whole one on packet prioritization and kind of the theory around that of DSCP and how all that operates, and then what some of the, because you can get into into all the different EF queues and how that works and how that's prioritized in the router, and then that can lead into the online sub express route. And so as I said, this is session one of N, where N is a very large integer.
And so continue to post in Yammer. You can even hit us at Twitter at Skype for Business. I think it's at Skype Business, right? So hit us there. Make sure that you're keeping the information flowing to us, because we want to make sure we're able to provide you with the information you want, not just the stuff we want to talk about, right?
Yep.
So with that, I think our next one is in 2 weeks.
Yep. You will be back at the same time in 2 weeks, and we'll let you know what the topic is here in about a week once we get it finalized. And thanks for the time, and thanks for joining us. Really love doing these and love having an audience. So thanks for coming out. Appreciate it.
Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.